Jacinta.
Is it J-A?
J-A.
Jacinta. Okay. You have an interesting combination of things in your hands, Jacinta. Your hands look, at first glance, they look like an artisan's hands. And not only do they look like an artisan, you have the Star of Apollo underneath your ring finger on the right hand, and that's high creativity. Smart, like you're smart, and that's different. And a friend of mine, what's the name of the town? It doesn't matter what town she moved to. She and her husband moved to Mexico about 5 years ago, and so she sent me 25 tin or silversmith. They made jewelry. They made pieces that went on chairs. Mexican artisans. And were there any women? I don't know if there were any women in the group, but they all had hands. You know, your hands could easily fit in there, except that if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're understimulated. You're getting bored. You get irritated with that, and yet you have the hands of the artisan. So it's like you've got artisan and I'll just call it intellect, and they're mixed together, and it's not an easy combination actually. The artisans, it's like they're working. Let's say they're making pottery. They're working at their potter's wheel. Their concentration is there, and they're filled with it, and they're enjoying it, and they're making something, and it's so luscious and all that. You've got like umpteen other brains doing other things simultaneously. So one of your brains wants to do that, but you got umpteen others that are, who knows what they're doing. They're doing umpteen other things. You follow how I'm describing this? But if you did something that was more intellectual, that got you too far away from artisanship, there'd be an ache. Well, I'll tell you what I would do if I were you, though. I would combine artisanship with some sort of learning program for, pick a subgroup, not necessarily learning disabled, but some subgroup, so that you'd be involved in something that was much more intellectually stimulating. Let's just say my daughter works with autistic kids, so let's say that you were working with autistic kids and teaching them pottery. It's not a perfect example, but it'll do. In this case, you're doing artisanship and you're working directly with pots. But you have a much bigger model, and you have to put together a proposal for the public school system of such and such, and to do that you have to do research. You have to have made phone calls, you have to be in touch with different people, you have to have an argument because you know who's in charge of the board and what their pressures are. But then tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. you're getting your fingers directly into the clay. So in my story you're using both. And neither of the two parts that I mentioned is being ignored. If you pick A or B and not AB, you're going to get cranky with what you're up to. There's two, you know, you can get cranky A or cranky B, but you'd be cranky either way. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Wow. You have really complicated fingerprints. You have really complicated fingerprints. So, you know, I've got like 64 more seconds for you, and you have complicated fingerprints. So I'm going to take a piece out, the piece I find most intriguing. Okay. You could probably figure out what I'm talking about as I start talking next. Okay, so there are special issues about snake oil in your fingerprints. You know what snake oil is? Snake oil was what was sold in the Old West in the 1800s when people would arrive in town and say, I've got a bottle of stuff, and if you drink this, it's only $5. You know, you'll be cured of all your illnesses. And then there was somebody says, I'll try it, and this was one of the two guys in the scam. And he was in town for a week and he was limping and he couldn't see. And all of a sudden he throws away his crutches and he could see because he bought the bottle, and then everybody buys it and it's just whiskey. And then by the next morning when they all wake up, the two of them are out of town and going to another town 70 miles away to sell more of their whiskey at $5 a bottle. So this was called snake oil sales. Phony healing. Okay. You have the whole deal in your hand about not wanting to be accused of any snake oil in your life, and you have this kind of hot button about all forms of healing that are in any way based on hypocritical, phony grounds. And there's people with that's it's one piece of your fingerprints. People with stuff like that in your fingerprints have ability to help people and don't use it sometimes because they're afraid of being accused of snake oil. Remember, this is in your fingerprints prior to birth. Some of them become psychic debunkers because they're trying to go around the world and point to where the snake oil is today. But what I was seeing in your fingerprints deals with you in some way being in a public forum and doing something that is of a healing nature, which means you'll get accused of snake oil. And there's a whole bunch of you that doesn't want to go there and allow any of that story to unfold. Of course, that you will keep you from your life purpose if she gets her hands on your steering wheel.